Hello everyone. My name is Shreyas Deshmukh. I am a co-founder of Asian Pathfinders along with Pallavi Adi. We welcome you all for today's dialogue on management of rising sea levels and coastal erosion in South Asia. Today's session is a part of a series of discussion on adaptability to climate change, which we have started earlier in November on the background of COP26. You can find the recordings of the previous sessions on our YouTube channel. Before heading to today's session, a little about Asian Pathfinders. We have started this initiative in June 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, which has isolated all of us. But it wasn't just the reason. We felt a need for an interdisciplinary, informal, open platform to reach out to the scholars and experts from all the disciplines of social and pure sciences to learn from each other. Hence, since our inception, we have conducted sessions on different topics such as women empowerment, cyber politics, and geopolitics, etc. We conducted these sessions in two formats. One is fireside chats. These are 1-hour sessions held on the first 3 Saturdays of the month from morning 11 to 12 Indian Standard Time. This Saturday, do join us for the fireside chat on changing social fabrics in the new climate world, for which Appadurai Nambi, a Director Climate Resilience Practice from World Resources Institute, will be speaking. While the dialogue in the form of panel discussion which we have today is usually on the last Thursday of every month from 5:30 to 7. But today is the exception as we could not conduct a session in the last month. All our sessions are open. However, there is a simple guideline we expect that everyone should follow. Respect views of others, respect intellectual property, and please stay on mute because we may not see people here right now who are attending live session, but we have lots of followers on our YouTube channel who do follow our discussions and go through all the discussions. You can reach out to us for suggestions and ideas through email and social media. Now coming to today's session, we have Dr. Saurabh Thakur as a moderator. Dr. Saurabh is an associate fellow at the National Maritime Foundation in New Delhi. His work focuses on the issues of global environmental politics, equity, climate security, and sustainable transition. His research sites at the intersection of climate governance, international politics, and sustainability, looking specifically at the climate security and blue economy discourses in the context of South Asia. Currently, he holds the CDRI Fellowship at the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, for which he is working on the project incorporating infrastructural resilience in India's port-led developmental model. Thank you, Saurabh, for joining us today. Over to you for further proceedings.
Thank you, Shreyas. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in on this webinar today. And thank you to Shreyas and Pallavi for extending this invitation to moderate this very important session. So now, coming to the theme of this particular session today, this webinar, water is a very critical element throughout history of, if you look at even it in civilizational terms, water is a very critical resource that we have. And one property of this water, which is the volatility of the water, has pretty much shaped both the mythologies and how we look at the world and how we want to live in this world. And this may be true if you look at a much more longer historical pattern. And even if you look at current situation, whether it is through your cultural motifs of climate change, if you're reading climate fiction, if you're looking at movies that are describing climate change to you, water is very much essential and to this debate. But if you look at this current moment where we stand today at, climate change and sea level rise are not fiction anymore. These are realities that we have to deal with. World's ice sheets are melting at an unprecedented rate. Sea level projections of scientific bodies like IPCC are now matching with the fiction that we've told for ourselves and prophecies that we've made for many years and many centuries almost. So anthropogenic climate change today is reshaping the planet itself, and especially the oceans, which makes nearly 70% of this planet. Scientists are calling this a new epoch, a new geological epoch in the history, and it's been termed as the Anthropocene, which translates as the age of humans. Historian Dipesh Chakravarty argues that human beings in the age of Anthropocene are acting at par with the geophysical forces of this planet. And that idea in itself must give us a pause, and must give all of us a pause, including the nation state, the corporates, the bureaucracies, the civil societies, communities, and individuals. Now, if you must look at oceans at this current point in time in the context of climate change, we must ask the question that what will be the fate of ocean given the current projections that we have coming in on climate change? What will be the fate of these oceans? What will be the fate of the people who depend on these oceans, not just for the food and livelihoods, but also as a form of identity? Then also we have to raise the question of floral and faunal biodiversity, which is nearing extinction in many cases in many parts of the world. This particular webinar and the topic that has been selected for this webinar today is I feel it's an extremely important effort. This topic of sea level rise and its management and coastal erosion in South Asia is a topic that must be discussed with great urgency at this point, because states in South Asia are very highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And the dire projections that are coming in, we must prepare right now at this moment so as to mitigate and adapt to the ill effects of climate change. The IPCC's recent 6th assessment report that came out very recently this year gives us a very, very dire picture when you look at global sea level rise, which has risen, according to this report, since 1900, more than any other preceding centuries. At least, and the report cites almost with high confidence over the past 3,000 years. Then there is also the issue of thermal expansion in our oceans and melting ice sheets, which are contributing to towards this phenomenon of sea level rise. Within domestically, in India itself, the Ministry of Earth Sciences came out with a first regional assessment for South Asia last year, and it made a startling revelation of sorts, where you saw that the sea surface temperatures in the tropical Indian Ocean rise between the period of 1951 to 2015, rose by almost 1 degree Celsius, which is much higher than the global trend of almost 0.7%. Now, I will not go further into statistics at this point because we have a very good panel today, which is going to discuss these issues in greater detail. And I think I'll jump right into the session at this point and ask our first speaker, Ms. Vidya Soundarajan. She has worked in the field of climate change, renewable energy, natural resource management, conservation, and sustainable development for over 23 years. She is currently the Director of Ecological Footprint Portfolio at WWF India in New Delhi. She also has experience in managing and delivering of multidimensional climate resilience programs across South Asia, also known as climate proofing growth and development. And prior to this, she was also engaged as a senior regional advisor on energy, climate, and growth with the United Kingdom government, responsible for South Asia. She is an onboard advisor to the UNFCCC Adaptation Secretariat on Resilience Frontiers, planning adaptation beyond 2030. And she also sits at the advisory board of Green Coast Skills Foundation, which is a German initiative to promote climate resilient agricultural technology. So I'm definitely looking forward to this session, and I yield the floor to Ms. Soundarajan. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Sorry. So 3 years of Zoom, and yet we make this mistake every day. Huge apologies. Thank you very much for the introduction. And firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to this conversation. This has been a very passionate piece of conversation for me, and I have been talking about this, also been part of conversations where I have learned quite a bit. And sorry, just give me a moment. I have.
Okay, then.
Okay, thank you. So I essentially wanted to put forth, I mean, we all know the perils of climate change and the sea level rise and the impacts, but I wanted to also draw the focus to a conundrum that we are facing. And I would potentially take the example of very, very important, ecologically important, and important from a human perspective, settlements such as Sundarbans, mangrove deltas, and also India from that perspective that it has over 7,800 kilometers of coastline and a huge share of population. So it's a fairly big issue for us. Coastal resilience, as you all know, is very, very big. But what I really wanted to start my conversation before we move to solutions and addressing the solution is one of the complicated challenges that we face here. While we are aware that the sea level is rising and it's because of the global rise in temperature and ice on land melting and contributing to more sea water and disastrous events, there is also a huge perverse impact of mitigation. So we have all been actively talking about, hydropower across the Himalayas. That's renewable energy. Obviously, from a climate perspective, works brilliantly. But if you have seen, there is a recent study which shows a huge reduction of about 5.4 billion tons, cubic metric tons of silt deposition has reduced in the last 30-40 years, primarily because of the fact that, we are stopping all the silt that is coming from the Himalayas and not allowing it to reach the coast because it's, a number of hydropower projects, a lot of development happening. And all of that, on one end, we can say it's anthropogenic, but one of the primary reasons why hydropower is such a big draw is because it's renewable energy and carbon mitigation. And so we are thinking we are addressing climate impact. So it's not straightforward. I'm very sorry to start with such a negative note to say, while there might be a solution, but for example, the entire existence of Sundarban mangroves is dependent on the million tons of silt that comes on or from all the rivers. It's deposited. It's got very volatile fringe. The land contours are very volatile. The land will be here this year, next year it will be there. The communities have lived a very volatile life. They have moved around, but we have changed all of those development paradigms, and we know that there is pressure from both sides. So that is when none of the solution actually works from a single window from my perspective. I think, you also mentioned ports, and I wanted to talk about this. And as part of some of my previous work, I've been having ongoing discussions with mainstreaming climate risks into port development, into port development lending. So while the planning is done from 100 years of time series data, it's analyzed. The climate projections are not yet internalized, and nobody is really looking at there is a particular engineering aspect required in a ports called breakwater. So the depth of breakwater, at what point do the breakwater construction happens, what's the half-life of the port, none of this is calculated yet. And so eventually, if we looked at it from a loss and damage perspective, we are obviously going to have massive loss and damage because we have gone ahead and built a lot of this, vaguely aware that climate change and sea level rise is going to happen, but not necessarily internalizing it. So, there is also this standalone conversation. So much more than us having these conversations about coastal erosion, the dependence of fisher folk, the fish biodiversity, the marine biodiversity. I'm sorry, I'm having like a power outage here, but so I have gone dark, but I will continue to talk. Hopefully my Wi-Fi is still working. So all of these issues, I'm having power outage. anyway. So all of these issues are so interconnected, and they are happening so quite often that when it comes to a complex country like India, from my perspective, trying to bring in the development, as in the the prosperity, the progress, the development of the country, the economic growth, certainly keeping that in the center, but also addressing the human, the value of human life, the value of animal life, the value of biodiversity, the coastal protection. We are a subcontinent very proud of that. The importance of the coastal area, the huge coastal economy, which has gone down by over 45% in the last 20 years. The latest World Bank study had published that. So looking at it from a socio-economic perspective, environmental perspective, and looking at solutions not necessarily just on location, but looking at solutions far and beyond the location also. So potentially looking for solutions for coastal erosion in Sundarbans out there in the Himalayas. So looking for solution for, increased number of disasters and water coming inside the horizontal inlet of water by not just manually retreating the population from there, but doing forward thinking and advanced thinking and internalization of key climate risk through those big investments, big loans, and big debt that is procured by all of these, infrastructure that is being developed. So looking ahead, looking beyond, both in terms of time frame, both in terms of sectoral approaches that needs to be done, but also in terms of the entry point of addressing the coastal erosion. So we just need to, just like climate change is a global phenomenon, exactly like climate solution is a global phenomenon, to me, addressing coastal erosion and to me, addressing the sea level rise and the impact on the coastal communities, the impact on the coastal economy needs to be addressed by and far beyond the coastal areas. And then we will still be able to look for longer term solutions and not just leave the highly vulnerable fishing community and coastal community to deal with it, or just simply talk about sea walls, or just simply talk about relocating them, or talking about alternate livelihoods for those communities in the coast that are currently, either having prawn farms or fisheries. So the solution has to be far and wide. And I suppose this is what I also learned from being part of the Resilient Frontiers, which is about looking at climate adaptation beyond 2030. The idea is to, and one of the unique things about Resilient Frontiers is that across a table, if we are talking about water or food security, we will have people like a blockchain expert, an AI specialist. We will have a security specialist like human security, space scientist, and of course climate scientist. Also, an investment banker, also a livelihoods champion, sitting across the table and talking about one solution for one particular point from completely different perspectives. I think that's the focus I would like to keep for today's conversation. There is huge opportunity for science. There is huge opportunity for social science. There's huge opportunity for economists, architects, space scientists, geologists to all come together and find solution collectively, and not necessarily look at the problem as a localized problem for the coast of India. With that, I think I will stop my initial few points that I wanted to say and just leave it at setting the context, and hope to be able to add once the other esteemed speakers have given their inputs.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for staying within time here. And I'll now request my next speaker, who is in no need of introduction. Dr. Atiq Rahman is a very leading voice in the Global South on climate change. He's a leading environmental development specialist with a very wide national, international, and global experience and involvement in sustainable development, climate change, environment and resource management, poverty and equity, disaster management, people's participation, global governance, and modeling and evaluation issues. Just to go over briefly his bio, he's the current executive director of the Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies. And besides being the executive director of this very leading think tank in Bangladesh and in South Asia on resource management and climate change, he is also the team leader of the Climate Change National Adaptation Programs of Action NAPA synthesis in Bangladesh. He's the chairman of Regional Network of Climate Action Network South Asia, CANSA, and the coordinator of the Global Forum on Environment and Poverty, an international network mandated by UNCED. He was elected the chairperson of the Coalition of Environmental NGOs in Bangladesh and continues to represent this very vibrant community as its principal spokesperson and decision maker. More recently, he has been the key advisor to the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, who is a global panelist of 10 heads of governments of SDG 6 on safe drinking water and access to sanitation. He's also, apart from his role in the think tank community, he's a leading climate change scientist and has been a leading contributor to the IPCC reports. He actively participated in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the first one as a planner, in the second as a lead author on policy, in the third and fourth as a lead author on adaptation. On fifth, he on training of IPCC authors, and further he made a leading contribution as a leading author on the IPCC special report on methodological and technical issues in technology transfer in 2000, and as contributing lead author of IPCC special report on renewable energy resources and climate change mitigation in 2012. Just to add on to that, he has received a number of accolades, which includes a Nobel Peace Prize as a lead author of the IPCC Fourth Assessment Report. He also won the 2008 Champion of the Earth Award under the UNEP, and the highest environmental award by Bangladesh government, Poribesh Padak, in 2008 as well. He is an institutional builder. BCAS has been a major influence in building major institutions in South Asia, such as International Center for Climate Change and Development, Nansen, Bangladesh International Center for Coastal, Ocean and Climate Studies, Climate Action Network, South Asia, CANSA. He has been an active researcher, as I already said, and has been teaching and in various reputable universities around the world, including the Tufts, Fletcher School, MIT, Oxford, and Dhaka University in Bangladesh. So I think we are all looking forward to hearing from Dr. Rahman and his views on this very, very important topic. I yield the floor to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you, but I feel pretty embarrassed. I don't think I deserve those claims. Nonetheless, let me try and focus on the coastal issues and climate change. Let me look at South Asia from the sort of Bangladesh looking up, right and left, and looking south into the Bay of Bengal and the saline water, looking up north into the Himalayas and fresh water. So we are in the middle of that sandwich where water is the connector and water is the challenge in many ways. In South Asia as a whole, water has various characteristics or time-based significance. Too much water in the monsoon season is flood. Too little water in the dry season is drought, and fertility of the soil is replenished by water all along. Hence, the high population density of South Asia as a whole, but particularly Bangladesh, as you know, is one of the highest population density of 1,200 persons per square kilometer, which is pretty high. Anyway, the water comes from the north as far as Bangladesh is concerned, goes to the south, but Bangladesh is the estuary of the three largest river basin out of the, sort of four basin minus Indus, the Ganges, which goes through Nepal, India, Nepal, Bhutan, India, Bangladesh, all that way, and several states of India. Then the Brahmaputra, which comes from Nepal via India into Bangladesh and down south, takes all the water of the Himalayas, rainfall, and the Meghna, which is that comes from the Tripura side of water bringing to Bangladesh and then down. So Bangladesh basically is the end tip of the funnel where lots of this water come. Hence, Bangladesh is extremely fertile. At the same time, extremely vulnerable to floods. And absence of flood is basically sometimes drought, sometimes happy good days. So that is water and human beings. But ecosystem is part of that, and ecosystem has to be replenished by water, and there are various ecosystems on the way, and the flow of water determines the life of people, communities, economy, ecology, the rest, and the vulnerability of the system. Now, as far as resilient frontiers and beyond 2030 is concerned, Bangladesh has coped pretty well with the tremendous amount of population growth that we had. Many of you may recall, may not recall, 1971 is when Bangladesh, through its various reincarnation of East Pakistan, East Bengal, over the years, 47 up to 71 was East Bengal, East Pakistan. Before that, East Bengal. After that, it became part of the what is now Bangladesh. So this is history and geography laden by water put together. We have pretty high population growth rate, and it's much better than before, much lower than before. Nonetheless, people are increasing, and in 1971, at the time Bangladesh was born, the population was around 130 million. Now it's 170 million people, and so population growth is there. Nonetheless, the quality and the management of the population population comes in two forms. We have a mouth, so we have to be consumer, and that depends on how you use the mouth. Then we have two hands, which produces the goods and the services, and we do have a brain as well, come with every person, and that adds to the energy and the brain power. So it's a game of human capacity to do things, and fortunately, Bangladeshi people in general has understood the rivers as their life form and flow. Agriculture is the main productivity base, so mostly minus few crops, they are pretty much has been self-sufficient, but sadly they oscillate around a mean of poverty. So if the crop fails, or in some areas suddenly the economy gets stressed. If the crop is better, then you enter into export commodity of crop. So there are vulnerabilities built in. As to the climate change issues, yes, climate change is here and now. We have been one of the champions claiming it. Initially, we were, when we first talked about climate change about 40 years ago, we were declared madmen. Probably there is some truth in that, but not because of that reason. Maybe I'm mad otherwise. But climate change is here. And now the climate change is moving into a system which has stabilized vis-a-vis the past system of 3 decades or 4 decades. But now the water flow, population growth, and the demand for water, both in terms of natural resource management and replenishment, agriculture, and also increasing urbanization demands safe drinking water for the population, huge amount, and also the population's propensity to pollute. And we have learned without much smartness how to pollute water. So all that put together puts a huge stress on the system, but the balancing act is between how we manage the needs of the society vis-a-vis the needs, a supply capacity of water, how we manage it, protect it, and give it to human consumption, animal consumption, agriculture consumption, as well as our industrial need and day-to-day life as a whole. So human beings, water, ecosystems, and management practices, we have moved. Things have been moderately good. There is a participatory management in politics. Participatory management might be restricted or jaundiced by political history and others. But in reality, with natural resource, is the human beings who have been quite wise in terms of trying to use and not to abuse water too much. Nonetheless, in the present industrial period, the pollution that comes from all the industrial product out, etc., has been a challenge. Maintaining good health and hygiene of the communities have been good practice. But as you might all be aware, Bangladesh has a very thriving non-government or civil society community, which has been serving the local communities in a very direct way and supporting the local government. So Bangladesh central government, which is the Bangladesh government, and then the local government, which is in the district and sub-district level, we call it Upa Zilla. Zilla means district, Upa means half or semi. So these are little districts, and management has been done. People have learned how to live with this system, but nonetheless, pollution is increasing, health demands are there, but population growth rate has come down from around 2% increase to 0.3, 0.4%, but nonetheless, that's too much. I'm for one who is encouraging everyone to come to a zero population growth, so stabilized population. Wishful thinking maybe right now, but that's the way to move forward in the future, has to be progressive, but at the same time, feed all the people with good, nutritious food and safe drinking water. Those are the two basic needs. Then economy has to develop, and the export economy, as you might know, garment industry, garment and textile is the mainstay, but other sectors as pharmaceuticals and others are coming in. So economy-wise, Bangladesh has had for 3 decades, well, less than 3 decades, of about 5 to 6% growth rate, which is better than most of South Asia. But nonetheless, it has to look after itself very well. We have excellent relationship with our neighboring partners, and the complementarity of need and water is the continuity and linkage between Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, India on both sides, and the Bay of Bengal in the south. And Bay of Bengal is vulnerable to extreme events such as cyclones and a number of strong wind, which are not necessarily cyclones, but at the same time floods, which come from the north, which is freshwater flood, and from the south, sometime at water surge, which is a saline intrusion into the system, challenging the southern agriculture. Sundarbans is shared between Bangladesh and India, one of the world's largest mangrove forests. It's really a wonder that a population density that we have, or West Bengal has, we are still able to maintain the world's largest mangrove forest. This is quite a unique achievement, but people have been sensitive and looking after it. People do claim that there are Royal Bengal tigers, probably a few, not many people have seen that and very regularly, because its number is decreasing. On the other hand, as a whole, there is a reasonable progress going on, economic growth, social justice issues getting better, and at the same time, future and ecology of the system with water coming in and going out in a system with the Ganges system, the Brahmaputra system, and the Meghna system, three largest water systems South Asia, minus the Indus. This is the whole of South Asia's water that passes through Bangladesh. Let me stop there just to set the scene, the geography, ecosystem, role of water, role of productivity and food and safe drinking water and health of the population. Bangladesh has a very high population density. Growth rate should be even lower than what it is now, but people are conscious and trying to do their best. Thank you. Let me stop there.
Thank you so much, sir, for that very wide-spanning view of how water connects us and also challenges us in this region. Now on to the third speaker for this session, this dialogue, Dr. Sriganesh Jayagopal. He's presently working as the principal scientist in the National Technology Center for Ports, Waterway and Coasts at the Department of Ocean Engineering, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, Chennai. He obtained his PhD and MPhil degrees from University of Madras and his MSc degree from Anna University, India. He's a geologist with a specialization in coastal environmental and engineering, more oriented towards natural and man-made hazards and its assessments like shoreline analysis, tsunami and cyclone impacts. In addition, he's involved in field surveys, and installation and handling of oceanographic equipments, and therefore has a very, very vast field experience. His involvement in geophysical explorations and geotechnical investigations in major and minor ports of India through his institute are very substantial. He has almost 16 years of work experience in very different ministries and institutes and educational institutes in India and abroad. He's also worked as a scientist in a number of institutes, including Center for Remote Sensing and Geoinformatics at Satyabama University, National Institute of Ocean Technology and IoT, which comes under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, Government of India. He's worked in the oil spill modeling and environmental sensitivity index mapping at Annamalai University, and has also been part of the Ministry of National Economy in Muscat, Oman. So he's contributed significantly to implementation of coastal management information systems in southern Indian states, and has contributed extensively in the Lakshadweep Islands, especially on issues like low temperature and thermal desalination plants, shoreline change studies, and cyclone impacts to the island coastal structures. I think his views will be very relevant considering our topic is on coastal erosion today. I yield the floor to you, sir, and I request you to be within 10 to 12 minutes range. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the nice introduction. I'm very, first of all, thanks to Mr. Shreyas Deshmukh and Pallavi Yade to provide me the opportunity to be part of this discussion. Just like the dignitaries, I just wanted to throw some of the views of what I had faced in these last 1.5 decades. Can I share my PPT? Is it okay with the participants? So that I could able to go through that, in a systematic way of what is really required. I hope it's visible. So today's topic, what I'm trying to, the topic given is management of rising sea level and coastal erosion in South Asia. I just looked into the shorelines of the entire world, where now we are. I just came to know that our India is about 7,000 without islands, but if you see including islands, it will reach around our 16th place of 7,500 kilometer coastline of our mainland, including India's shoreline. If I see our South Asian coastlines, the sea level, the length of the, first of all, the country's coastline is about, in our India, as I mentioned, 7,500 kilometers approximately. In Bangladesh, it may be roughly around 580, and Sri Lanka about 1,300. about Maltese. These are the South Asian countries. What I just wanted to highlight where the sea level rise is having a huge impacts. What now we have to discuss. There are about many references to say that about 80% of the Maltese is about a meter above the sea level, which itself shows that it is highly vulnerable for the sea level rise. Already, about 90% of the islands have reported the floodings. One more thing, the 97% of the shoreline is under the erosion. For sure, shoreline changes induced by erosion as well as the other factor, the accretion also. These two are the natural processes that is taking place, not by matter of they're required over a large range of time scale. Where now we are concentrating of the sea level rise like that. The shoreline changes also need to be studied in a larger scale. Like the factors, wind, wave, and currents, are the natural forces that are easily move and move the the unconcentrated sand and soil in the coastal areas. These are the things actually making a more changes on the shorelines. This is what now in our India looks like. Everybody knows about this. Our each state-wise, I just made the coastline lengths, which is having the west coast of our India is having the longest coastline of the Gujarat state, which is about 1,600 line kilometer, which is having two gulfs. And if you see that, the peninsula of our India, there are three sides is covered by our ocean. On the east with the Bay of Bengal, south with Indian Ocean, and west with Arabian Sea. As everyone knows about this, the length of the coast is much larger when you compare about all other countries of South Asia. So the global sea level rise, I just wanted to concentrate majorly only on Indian coast, how it is had an impact. As I already mentioned by many of the earlier speakers, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel Climate Change, which is comprised of many of the economists and as well as the many of the scientists. They all confirmed that even 2018 results also says that the thermal expansion, which is of the ocean warming, that means the seawater will expand because of the rise in temperatures of the ocean water, and as well as the temperatures are in the rising trend, because of the global warming or we can say that the greenhouse effects. The temperature is rises increasing in our land, so which itself is making the ocean water to be expand, and as well as the surface ocean waters to be more higher temperatures than the older ones, bottom ones. The melting of ice sheets, which is about contributing about 52% of the global sea level. If you see this one again, the global warming by the ice caps and the icebergs, which leads to the melting of the North Pole and South Pole, as well as due to population growth that is actually rising our greenhouse effect. Also, everybody might have been studied or might have heard in the news. The shrinkage of the glaciers and as well as the ice sheets are adding the water to the more to the oceans. These are the major factors for the global sea level changes, about 38%, 52%. The rest was about 10%. For the visible sea level rise, where we can have an impact, we can say that the tides, many of you might have been seen, rise and fall of the water levels, which may be increased once if you of southern end of our India towards the northern side, where West Bengal is located. So if you see the tidal propagation from the south, it may be from less than a meter to once if we go north, let us say West Bengal, which is on the meter, and which will be an oscillation period of only 6 hours. Where our northernmost Arabian Sea is having our Indian state Gujarat. There, if you see inside the Gulf, the tidal range is about more 10 to 11 meter. That means which in 6 hours there is a fluctuation of the water levels in 11 to in average of 11 meters. We are facing that. So what it says, we can able to visually see this rise and fall of the water levels in the form of tides. But how the sea level rise is going to make a huge impact onto this? Definitely, it required a long period measurements, long period understanding of the rise of the sea. sea level, as well as Professor, I think Dr. Atiq Rahman has mentioned about the storms and floodings. As yes, the Bay of Bengal is having serious the increase of the frequency of the cyclones is in olden 1 decade before, it was about 3 to 4 or less than 3 per year. We can able to see the um, cyclones. But now in the present past, I can say in the last decade, we can see about more than 4 to 5 cyclones per year we are facing in our Bay of Bengal, which may having very devastating impacts also. What it does, it's making a changing of the coastline, which is ultimately making a no problem to the erosion. That is one factor. Beyond that, which you could not able to visualize, is the saltwater intrusion through the groundwater. That is the saltwater making into the groundwater into the saltiness, which we cannot able to identify it by naked eyes. But what are other factors we can able to physically see with our naked eyes? Tides, storms, cyclones, shoreline changes. Similarly, the land subsidence is, I can say that the Bengal Delta, where we are having a sinkage of the lands, which evidently provided, and some references shows that in our India and Bangladesh, where the Sundarbans, we are having a land subsidence. If you see that the sea level rate by study, there are several studies started by studying the tide gauge data. Now the recent decade shows that by studying the satellite path by measurements and the past data from NOAA, it all shows that the trend is in the increasing way. So it is projected that what could be the reason, as I mentioned earlier, the thermal expansion as well as the global warming. Other things, it leads to the vulnerable to the all the low-lying coastal areas where our populations is highly situated. But not only that, the sea level rise problem is with large uncertainties, like the spatial, as I mentioned, on east coast and west coast, the tide range is different. Similarly, the water levels is also different. So the spatial as well as the temporal as well as the simultaneous measurements throughout the world or throughout the Southeast Asia at each locations, and greenhouse gas and carbon emissions and temperature, everything need to be studied, which all having its own uncertainties when compared to study if you want to have a understanding of the global sea level rise. The impacts is majorly influenced by the our human, no other go, because greenhouse gas, as we will say, emission of our carbon dioxide, again plantations, depletion of the trees, again reducing the greenhouse gas emission, but does not avoid the sea level rise impacts. So by your human, by your anthropogenic activities, if you reduce, stop cutting the trees, yes, then that only is not a solution for the stoppage of the sea level rise. Then again, we have to prepare, as well as we have to particularly need to manage this problem. How to manage this problem? As already Dr. Atiq Rahman sir has mentioned, the sea level rise of 1 meter. The study was provided by I just took from the website by Google search. If you rise 1 meter of the sea level, the areas which are, you can see the dark shades of the blue on the middle figure, it can show that if 1 meter rise, these areas will be fully vulnerable, inundated. If you increase 1.5 meters, then you can see the blue color on the right hand side, the murder further into the land. So it shows that about more than for 1 meter, about 15 million people will be under the threat, and about 20% likely to be disappear. Much of the coast of Bangladesh is very close to the sea level, which is everybody can visually see. One good thing is there is no erosion, can able to visually see that. But what are these hazards can lead to? In geological scale, if you see the sea level rise, yes, it need to be studied on the axis. If you see about more than 10,000 years of data, we need to be first understand. But if you want to come to the engineering scale, like the near shore currents, as well as the slope processes and the storms frequencies, everything, if you need to understand, yes, it could be able to get into the understanding of years to months of 100 years of data. If you can able to study, can come to some kind of conclusion that how this scales is having a major impact. Again, if you come to the hydrodynamic scales about the tides, winds, and waves currents, yes, it need to be studied in minutes, seconds, to days, to months to understand about the predictions of the futures. In terms of spatial extent, if you see on the y-axis, the lower 1 meter to 1,000 kilometer, if we cannot able to define that sea level rise within that less than 100 kilometer. it will be above 100 km. If you're able to study, we can see the major differences. Similarly, the land subsidence. So y-axis is provided. So what are the causes of erosion? If you see in general, there are many uncertainties we are having. Sometimes this is the straight shoreline, which is very quite normal. Some structures is there, some vegetation is removed. So there are natural as well as the man-made processes which is available. There are cyclones, extreme waves, sea levels and tsunamis which are unpredictable. Though if you predict, but we must face it. But the man-made, the development of the ports, damping of the rivers, and the dredging the tidal inlets, these are all man-made problems which could be able to cause erosions to some other locations. So what are the hazards? The factors if you see in general, the long-term hazard, the sea level rise will come into the long-term picture, not in the short-term picture. So that's why the sea level rise needs to be studied in a very larger scale. If you see the erosion hazard, it's about 45% of the coastal hazards is by the erosion. About accretion, again, another factor which we are maybe not looking into it, because whatever the eroding, it is going to be deposited somewhere. That is called the accretion. About 35% is about accreted in some other location. It is making some kind of a problem to some other locations like river mouths, siltations. Again, needs to be dredging and all. The stable coast is only about 18% we are having. So I don't want to go into the case studies. Let me finish in a minute. So the natural processes if you see on the coast, there is erosion is mainly concentrated on where the shore, where the land and water is meeting. About maybe we can say high water line, low water line with the range of in the South India, maybe 100 meter to 200 meter. If you go towards the northern, east and west of India, it's about 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer. The erosion problem can persist. The transportation, if you see that rise in the sea level, it can be able to transport the sediment from the ocean to the land. Maybe if it's a cyclone, the picture is taken during the time of after the cyclone. So that's why the water we can see it is inundated to deposit on the right hand side. So what it says is the study of the entire system need to be done properly before going or taking into any of the decisions. So what it does, it is making a property loss as well as loss of tourism and as well as the coastal habitation and the damage to even coastal protections. If at all you are having without any planning for or you have had any kind of structure, that also will be destroyed. So all the infrastructures, majorly the loss of life, major threat, it is also need to be clearly understood, studied properly. So I don't want to go in details of each and every case studies as already across 10 minutes. Let me go to my final slide of what I wanted to show it here is, see the increasing resilience of the coastal community is majorly required for the mitigation of the erosion as well as for the management of the sea level rise, as well as the understanding of and the science and the technologies where our humans is involved for the protection. It's to be frank, it is helpless in the effect of natural calamities like the tsunamis, what as it has devastated. Now we can able to predict when it can happen, but we have to evacuate to make ourselves to be safer. So man can prevent the hazards becoming the disasters. So we have to learn to live with the harmony with the nature, and we have to take the precaution steps well in advance to make our life better or to be safe. So we need to plan for the retreat. We should not be near to the coast. Again, you have to accommodate in case you don't have any other option like islands. You have to go again. Levels of the buildings must be high raised. If you want to protect for your betterment, then for sure for developments, we have to go for some hard or soft different structures. Then again, if you want to attack, then we have to go like how the Gulf countries are making or Singapore countries they are doing. We can go into it and click in the developments. Thank you. I just wanted to give a final thanks to all the organizers as well as to the dignitaries of the today's sessions. Let's now open for the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And my apologies for but we'll come back to whatever the slides we couldn't look at in the next half an hour or so. So we now move on to the Q&A session, and we look forward to some questions you can share your questions in the inbox, and we can have a further discussion. I think I'll open this Q&A because I certainly have a lot of questions to all the three speakers. Beginning with Ms. Soundarajan, I hope you can hear us, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
All right. So you raised a very important question about, and based on your own experience about the challenges of internalization of climate policy into your regular policy. Now, I'm very interested in understanding that there is a certain, and it's something that even I've encountered in my own research, that we are trying to sort of overlap a climate policy onto an existing policy. And that doesn't necessarily always work. So my question really is, how do you overcome this challenge of how do you climatize an existing policy in countries in South Asia particularly? Ma'am, you're on mute.
Thank you. I did realize. Thank you. Pertinent question. And I'm very glad you've asked, because I've now worked with several governments, and I'm sure we'll have my other esteemed panelist Atiq Sahab also talking about it. Bangladesh, Maldives, whether it is India, Nepal, all of these countries, there is a little bit of a worry and concern about mainstreaming climate into the policies, into existing policies, because it is still, their worry is that it will hugely undermine the development objectives, and it will precede that the climate objectives become very important, pertinent. I, on the other hand, and this is not something that I have generated myself, but as a result of the work that we did with a large number of experts over 5 years on climate proofing growth and development in India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, and part of that work was also done in Southeast Asia. The priority issue for us is to actually mainstream climate as part of the efficiency strategy, as part of the resource security strategy, as part of the moving forward. It's like if we were to look at it from an income perspective, how do you manage your income? There is some saving, there is some spending, so that's how you attribute and distribute it. And so, which is exactly how we need to look at climate change also from that perspective. So in the sense, for private sector, for instance, if it is going to hit their bottom line, if it is going to be a primary resource issue, then they would go ahead and protect that, and we develop that further. It also helps bringing together joined up perspectives. So when you are looking at climate threat as not a standalone threat, but in conjunction, in together, saying that this is our end objective, this is how we want to grow in balance with nature. We want to continue to have that balance, human being and nature's balance. And towards that end, and climate change essentially is an imbalance. So you can't bring back balance by randomly putting stop to a few things, but how do you mainstream that across, whether it is agriculture, talk about more efficiency, more resource efficiency, looking at food, pest profiles, crops that will survive or not survive. We can look at infrastructure development and talk about loss and damage, but why in the first place build infrastructure in the line of fire, so to speak, like whether it is in the wetland or in a river's floodplain, and then keep crying about huge losses because of increased number of floods. So as long as we just deploy this efficiency, resource security, investment security, and keeping the future perspective in ahead, I do not think climate change, and there is a huge scientific community now talking about this, and especially UK government, for instance, have now mainstreamed climate across all of their portfolios. The big multilateral and bilateral development banks have all mainstreamed climate change across their portfolios, whether it is building bridges, or if it is building thermal power plants or ports, whatever the investment may be, ADB, World Bank and all the likes have to have the climate concern in it. So to me, mainstreaming climate is the priority area, and we will not have conflicts, and we can actually have a future-proofed. So that's how we proof our future, right? We protect our future, and we have a future-proofed policy.
Yeah, thank you. So Dr. Rahman, just extending on to that question, and especially in the context of Bangladesh, every time there is a debate or a conversation about climate change, we hear about Bangladesh and the challenges that it faces. But in a very recent article by Joyshri Roy in Atlantic, she argues that Bangladesh is actually a climate success story. And she argues that one of the ways it has done so is by focusing on the right parameters of how to address climate change. What do you think are the reasons behind this, if the climate success, you may argue, in Bangladesh? So you're on mute. Can I request the host, perhaps?
Yeah, is it better?
Yes, sir. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Great. Um, climate change itself is not a choice that anthropogens can take care of. We don't have a choice. What anthropogenous element is, we make the climate change happen by increasing our activities, not being aware of much of the complexities, and then gradually learning over the period. Within the if you want to give IPCC credit, then within their 4 or 5 IPCC sessions of world scientists working together, one of the best examples where scientists from rich countries, poor countries, different dimensions of different countries have worked together to come to this situation. And we have learned a few lessons, and we have learned how to work better as to make climate response or the development response policy prescriptive or policy responsive, not necessarily prescriptive. So that's how it has been happening. Now let's make a difference between what is climate variability and what is climate change. Climate variability, climate is the sum of weather over 20 to 30 years. So we are talking about long term. Climate change, within that, climate varies. You know, we have summer, winter, intra-annual variation, inter-annual variation, inter-decade variation. All those are quite well known or experienced. I mean, on a diurnal variation, the morning is cooler, midday is hotter, evening gets softer, midnight is cooler. All that becomes part of the integrated system. Mathematically very difficult to quantify those and put it into system, because then soon you have the seasons before you understood the days. You have a diurnal variability, seasonal variability, to annual variability, etc. Then the geography of South Asia. So I don't want to go into the complexities of those. Now, what is the success story for? Well, it isn't a success story that me or 10 scientists or 100 policymakers can take credit of. It is a survival instinct by the population at large. And Bangladesh has, 170 million people. So that cumulative, you can't just have a policy to get everybody excited about something. But everybody gets excited about their survival and basic self-interest. So the basic self-interest is defined by the ecosystem you have. If you have a financial system that is operative and operational, and you can access some resources from government system, private system, your survival techniques, you understand market behavior. These are, not done in the modeling sense of the word, but it is intuitive modeling by populations, by communities, and they do it themselves. And this is a progress in learning, and that's where, if you want to say the success story, that is the success story, that the human beings have understood their ecosystem slightly better as we go along and have been able to respond to that. which crops grows better. Now, just a simple example. Sea level is increasing, no question about it. You ask the coastal population, they'll tell you. The water used to come to my stairs, not on my floor. Now the water comes to my floor. I have raised by another 3 feet the height of my house. You know, coastal people are not idiots because they don't have any money from the government or anybody. They have to raise their floor, so they know something is happening. Then the intrusion of what comes in is saline water, as opposed to in Bangladesh, particularly what goes out is fresh water. With the 3 river systems, Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna, supplying from all over India, Nepal, Bhutan, and coming through Bangladesh, going up. So it's a hydrological system and a cycle. Those 2 given, then the whole economy, how do you make progress? What make it successful? Situation over which you don't have control is the amount of flow of water, because that is determined by rainfall in different points at different times and where it passes through. One of the determinants which is not discussed as much is the sediment in that water. Bangladesh river water, almost everywhere, looks like coffee with a lot of milk. That sort of, grayish, brownish tinge, which means there's a huge amount of suspended sediment. So that suspended sediment, the big ones fall off early. If the mean diameter of the suspended sediment is above microns or even bigger than that, it falls in the earlier part of the river. The suspended finer ones come down and they get excited and interactive, etc., and goes into the sea, where you know that many of the islands are coming up in the coastal area of Bangladesh and in the Bay of Bengal. These are basically those finer sediments settling down and then again broken down and settling down. So there is a whole dynamic process of land formation. And the land formation, the coastal area of Bangladesh, the southern part of Bangladesh, southern part of West Bengal, a bit of Odisha, all that happened in the last tens of thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years. So it's a dynamic system in geological terms. In geology, when you talk of millions of years, this is like kids' games going on. On the other hand, life is changing. People have to adjust to this given reality, and they do so. One of the good part of this fine sediment is that it increases the fertility of the soil, so you get better crops, etc. But it is also vulnerable to the slight variation in the altitude of the water, the height of the water level. So all those complexities have to be taken into account when people plan their annual plan for crops, variety versus production needed, transport system improving, all that. So there is the economic growth system, which is the transport system improving, money can transfer quickly, people can be given, women can be brought in as labor force, and a lot of those changes are happening. At the same time, we have the sociological changes, who's money, who's got more, who's got less, all that relationship, but also ecological system. What is the water? What is the limit? How much of it will be at which season? What sort of crops you can sow? What can you get out? What is the success? This is a real life learning, and experiment is done at micro level. This is happening at a meso level in tens of kilometers rather than acres of land. So over which we have no control. So these mega systems, like hundreds of kilometers of the water coming in, land formation, and tens of kilometers of ecosystem shifting around and giving different crops, different alternatives, where the human is the one who interacts and learns this quickly. And before you've learned for 10 years, the system is shifting again, changing to something different. So it's a very dynamic community. And hence the coastal communities all over the world have been very dynamic. And if you look at the history of development of urban centers in the first 10 centuries or 15 centuries, it has been all waterways, river, on the river side. In Bangla, the word Ganj, G-A-N-G, which is Sirajganj, Company Ganj, Taliganj, all these means next to the river. So all these towns and civilizations grew up next to the river. Then the river shaped, things happen, and we understand better now, many of the through GIS modeling and others, what happens. But we have very little control over the system. At the same time, the economy is progressing. People have different demands. They use water differently. They have to use industries next to the water to the waste. And that means waste management of the rivers, all that is complex. Just to summarize that it's a dynamic picture where economic dynamics, hydrological dynamics, social dynamics, and the need for the planners to try to stabilize and understand systems are all interacting very closely. And so we have, I would say, decades, tens of years, not hundreds of years, to do these, because the human generation of each generation, let's say 20 to 25 years generation, doesn't have the luxury of dictating that. So we have to adjust to that reality. And in South Asia, things have gone reasonably well in terms of, let's put the crudest parameter of progress. How much carbohydrate is on the plate per day per person? In South Asia, that has increased. How much protein is there on per plate per person? Vegetarians, non-vegetarians, all that included, the protein has increased. The number of people have increased en masse. So we have to, so the number of plates have increased. So if you take all that into account, we are, if you look at a sort of historical and decadal perspective, we are not doing too badly across South Asian subcontinent. On the other hand, we have a space to be managed. We have water flow over which we have no control. We can manage it once their water comes. And because of the climate change, the thermal stress on water is such that there is more evapotranspiration because of the heat. And then, which means more cloud formation, which means more rain somewhere else. May not be in the same place where they used to be. So there is a dynamic shift in geography. So geography with hydrology is having its own relationship shifting. So these are mega processes of complexities. I can talk a lot of these, but this may not, time will not permit us. On the other hand, let's say the bottom line is that it's a dynamic picture. We have to adjust. We have the luxury of controlling our own ecological and economic system up to a point. We don't have the luxury of controlling larger areas and big systems. So the governments use it as a microcosm of their nation. So they do it as local government systems.
Yes.
In India, they have chosen one type of local government. In Bangladesh, one type, Pakistan. But in Nepal is much more integrated. Local system controls everything. Let me stop there and say.
Yeah, I think let's take that question of dynamism further and ask Dr. Jayagopal. There are two questions very much related to this. Dr. Jayagopal, firstly, have any lessons been learned from 2015 Chennai floods? Gayatri asks this question. I mean, in terms of countering climate change, at least it doesn't seem on the surface, taking into account what happened in Chennai last year. So she's talking about the repeating incidents of floodings in major coastal cities of at least India. The second question I'll read out, and I think we can take both of them together. Considering, Shreyas is asking that, considering the inherent in natural vulnerability of Bay of Bengal, such as low flat coastal terrain, shallow depth of water, and easterly waves, and that is why it is the epicenter of world's hazard belt. Can you talk about few technical case studies as what other countries belongs to the region working particular projects to avoid disasters? Any collaborations with other developed countries on this issue as well? So I think both of these questions you can take, sir, at this moment.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much. I think, first of all, thanks to both of them for throwing the nice questions for the right topic. Yes, let me come to this first question. 2015 Chennai floods in terms of the climate change. Yes, actually, to be frank, the 2015 flood has happened during the during the period of exactly the monsoon. So there is not much, concentration of the. It is not happened on the unusual time of the monsoon. It is expected rain, but only thing is the flooding has happened due to some other factors. So the flood was unexpected one because of other reasons. So, but the climate change, I don't think so. It is happened because of the climate change. The heavy rain which has downpoured on 2015 of December, again immediately after the flooding, one more, if I'm correct, one more cyclone has formed, and it has also washed away. When it has downpoured more of our Chennai city. See, both the seasons, as she may be, the Gayatri may be thinking that because of the climate change, this too has happened during the month of December. The severity, yes, because of the not only the cyclone, downpouring of the rain, all together has induced this flooding in our Chennai at 2015. And yes, even this year also, I think we faced heavy rainfall, but luckily not much of the flooding situation, but water stagnant situation we faced. So in climate change point of view, if we speak about the Chennai floods, the downpouring happened because of, we have to consider several factors, not only why it is coming only to the Chennai, why not to the other states, why not to the other districts? It is a part of a small location where people are more concentrated, highly affected. Because of the huge settlement, we came to know about this much of downpouring, this much of people affected. It came into the medias, it came to the worldwide. Many countries still, even this year, the Germany also affected very severely. Even this year again, our Chennai also affected very severely by heavy downpouring of the rains. So yes, the climate change, we can say that it is taking a part, it taking a role by the formation of the cyclones and the downpouring of the rains. The intensity is increased, but it is happening during the period of exactly where the prediction by the IMDs, Indian Meteorological Department, used to say that yes, this November, we can say October, November, December, or the monsoon period. During those periods only we are receiving the rains. We are not see unusual rains during other months. So we have to prepare ourselves for this kind of events. That's what I can able to short this answer. I'll come back to you for in detail for further descriptions required in this regards. Second, the question is on the vulnerability of the Bay of Bengal. The hazard belt. Yes, our India is in the hazard belt as we are facing a severe cyclones, increased frequency of the cyclones recent years. I can throw this question in another way. Let us go back to the 2004 IoT tsunami, where made a huge devastation for our entire Indian Ocean countries, majorly to our India, Indian eastern belts of our India. The entire Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, even West Coast, some of the locations, Kerala also felt a very severe impact because of the tsunami. Technically, if you speak, the tsunami early warning system of our India, which is led by our INCOIS, Ministry of Earth Science, we had taken a lead role immediately after facing this tsunami of 2004. Again, within 2014, 2005, 6, we made several studies, understand many difficulties, and we implemented the early warning system in 2007 for our entire Indian Ocean countries. That is a major, lesson we learned, and also we throwed more light to the even entire world ocean community, I can say, because that was the one, I can say, the major tsunami after for our Indian coast of 1945, which was unknown by many people, which has happened in Andaman. But for sure, this 2004 made a great lesson for our Indian coastal community, as well as the scientists and the engineers whom are working in the coastal areas, and not forget about this event. It has devastated more than 2 million people, but now the early warning system is existing, and it is providing early warning system not only to our India, even to our other countries, as you mentioned, yes, Maldives, neighboring countries, Sri Lanka, many other countries of borders of Indian Ocean, they are providing alerts. The system is maintained exclusively by our Indian National Center for Ocean Information System of our Indian Ministry of Earth Science. Similarly, our IMD, I can say, Indian Meteorological Department, which can able to provide the weather warnings to our entire Indian Ocean climatologist, coastal ocean, not only coastal ocean states, as well as to the mainlands, because the East Coast cyclone is now it is starting at the mainland and is crossing to the Arabian Sea also on the southern end. It has happened during last year. The impact of the cyclone, though we thought that it was devastated after reaching the Bay of Bengal, reaching Tamil Nadu, but again, like what happened, it has moved to the Kerala coast. Again, there is some kind of severe impact further. So that is what. So IMD is providing a right kind of warnings nowadays. I can say the recent years, a few couple of years before also, it started giving a right type of informations, right type of the landfall locations. I mean, the predictions is now improved like compared to equivalent to other developed countries. We are also stepping into the already stepped into the predictions of the perfect warning systems to
Right.
most of the countries.
Okay.
Yeah, these two. Sorry, yeah, please.
Yeah, I think I'll take one more question from the chat box. Shreyas, do we have time to go for one more round, or perhaps we can ask the speakers for closing comments?
We have still 5 minutes left, so we can.
Yeah, I think I can.
All right.
Sorry, I think Dr. Rahman wants to say something.
Yes.
He
Yeah,
wants to
please.
finish.
So you're on mute.
So sorry, please.
Can someone, sir, you're on mute. Dr. Rahman?
Okay.
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The point that I was trying to make is the perceived and the real dangers of disasters is a combination of the impact of an event and the preparative capacity and responsive capacity of the system, whether it's the ecosystem, social system, the economic system of those who would participate come to the governance system at the end. So there has been disasters. There has been. I compliment the statement made that the quality of the forecast and early warnings have gone much higher quality, and people now depend on that. Previously, they used to talk straight to God and wait for warning, but now they go to the Met Office and get their warning. So there has been a shift in the where the resource is.
Yeah.
And then on the last question of the impacts have been reduced by better transformation coordination of social system, climate system, the ecological system as a whole, with the governance system of that. Now, if there is a cyclone, if there is a warning cyclone within 7 hours, our whole national team of cyclone planners sit and this starts percolating right to the Upazila or the sub-district system and goes down sharply. So people are prepared. Previously, we used to say, where's the money? Where's the food? Where's the shelter? Now, all that kept on preparedness and tremendous amount of capacity and learning has taken place, which reduces the impact on the population at large, particularly the vulnerable population. So the whole system, I would give credit to the disaster managers and the disaster management system that the impact has been reduced. The death, mortality has been reduced to big cyclones used to have, 100,000 mortality has now come down to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now with 20 people died is a big deal. Now there was a time that was just a noise in the system. So we are improving on that, and genuinely things are getting better in the management part, but at the same time, nature is, through its climate change phenomena, is intensifying some of the impact and even frequency of some of these happenings, whether cyclones or floods or tidal floods or any other responses. Let me stop there.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll take one last question to Ms. Soundarajan. This is from Charumati Haran, and the question reads as, in terms of requesting climate finance internationally from developed countries, what do South Asian countries focus, and she uses a strong word, rhetoric on, physical infrastructure or climate migration? So essentially, should we focus on mitigation or adaptation at this point, looking at from a climate finance perspective?
Certainly priority is for adaptation, because there is a huge impact on the South Asian countries and the people. The bigger focus is try to embed and intertwine mitigation and adaptation, and one of the upcoming and very promising solutions seems to be deployment of nature-based solutions, which while providing the resilience and while providing the enhancement of adaptive capacity, is also parallelly helping in accrue carbon sequestration and capture. So I think human life, loss and damage, resource damage is obviously at a very high priority for the South Asian governments, and they should look for it. On the while saying that, there is also sort of in terms of the growth moving forward, which is anyway development with sort of some focus of transaction on mitigation. The countries could use their own sort of mainstreamed public finance to achieve that and be able to contribute. But globally, small island developing states, and especially the Pacific Islands and some of the coastal areas of countries such as India, the adaptation and seeking finance for adaptation and minimizing loss and damage needs to be high on the criteria. Sorry, I'm going to take half a minute more and say, instead of focusing on the negative aspect of climate migration, I think one of the newer approaches and articulation is around planned retreat, where the people do not have to be forced to retreat in an urgent and sudden and under a disastrous condition, but one proactively creates a similar ecosystem in anticipation of beyond 2050, beyond 2070, and talks about some level of planned retreat for really highly vulnerable communities.
Thank you. I think that brings us to almost towards the end of this session, and Shreyas, I think I'll ask you to take over from here.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you so much. Recently, I was working on a BIMSTEC report in which we were looking into like how the BIMSTEC countries should cooperate, or how they are cooperating on disaster management and blue economy and other issues. And beside traditional security threats we have in this region, so definitely countries are investing in traditional security threats. But from today's discussion, I definitely understood from the presentation of Dr. Jayagopal, Dr. Rahman, and Dr. Soundarajan that countries are equally looking into these non-traditional security threats and investing into it, and building resilient system to protect people. So I really I would like to say thank you to Dr. Rahman, Dr. Jayagopal for their time, and Dr. Soundarajan as well for sharing their thoughts and their presentation, and Saurabh for wonderful moderation also, and all your inputs and insights to the session. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining today's session. I'm looking forward to all of you to join our next session on coming Saturday, which is on changing social fabrics in the new climate world, which I have said earlier. So thank you so much. Have a great evening ahead. Take care and stay safe. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.